Sonoma State Dynasty Deep Dive, Part 2. Wanted to touch on some quick notes before we got in to the meat of everything here today. First of all, I am posting all of these on Spotify as well, so if you've listened to the podcast I do with my friend Trevor that we haven't uploaded in forever just due to life going on, and you happen to come across this on there, this is a series I'm doing on YouTube, but wanted to let you guys know this is on Spotify and YouTube as well. Already have one season up. If you have not watched any of it yet, please give it some time. I definitely don't hit my groove until kind of the fourth or fifth episode, and I'm still finding my groove, right? Always getting better, always looking to improve, gonna continue to try new things in this next season and going forward. And also, quick note, sorry about the white versus orange lines at the top of the screen. It really bothers me. I used a theme and was editing everything on it to fit what I wanted to do, but I could not figure out how to get that line to change. So I apologize for that. And then another thing, I don't know if people noticed in the conferences last time, but I had UCSB listed in the Pac-12. I don't have a specific section in this breakdown for them, but I did want to touch on them real quick, the backstory there. I went to Sonoma State, both my parents and my brother, they went to UC Santa Barbara. At Sonoma, we have, at least to my knowledge, no real natural rival. I played rugby there, and I guess you would call Humboldt and Cal Maritime kind of our two biggest rivals. And then I want to say our lacrosse team was rivals with the University of Nevada, but I can't say that's 100% true, nor do I know any sort of story or background regarding that. So I created UCSB to kind of give us a natural rival, figured it'd be a fun team to use because of my family connection, and they also have a defunct football team. Sonoma State and UCSB have played a game in the past, put in some footage here in this video, so it's not a totally made-up matchup, but there are two team builder teams in this, using UC Santa Barbara more just as a control team to give us a consistent team in the Pac-12 that's really good, and a rival that is really good. So they're meant to kind of be a model of a team from the Power 4 that could consistently be pretty good. So that is the use for them. But getting into Sonoma State specifics, again, I went there. We don't have a football team currently, had one up until 1992 or so. So it's fun to imagine, right? We're D2 in sports, so if we had an FBS caliber program, we'd be a smaller one. I put us in the Pac-12 because we're supposed to kind of resemble a team that's recently moved up from FCS, but is going all in. Like Sacramento State recently is, or maybe it's even still going on, but they were putting up a bid to be in the new Pac-12. So we're supposed to kind of resemble that, but then at the same time also have had some sort of controversy or something that happened in the last coaching staff, and that is why we have such a young team. If you watch the Dynasty first season, we only had like 7 seniors. So it's supposed to resemble a young team that hasn't quite built up the resources of other Power 4 teams, because I figured that way we really do get to start from scratch, and the Power 4 is meant to kind of be more of that middle ground of like, hey, you could win a national championship, but it's going to take some work, where the Group of 4 is truly meant to be like, hey, like you're lucky to be in this division, with all due respect. Like, we need to pick it up a little bit, and I feel like the structure of the Dynasty gives those teams a chance to do that. So going forward, or I guess continuing on the point, I would love to see a smaller school win a national championship. With the expanded playoff, there's a new sense of hope, because it feels like, at least to some degree in the past, it's been the limited playoff and limited involvement or perception, I guess, of smaller schools that's kept them out of having a real chance at winning a national championship. So it feels like that obstacles kind of getting overcome. At the same time, it's the SEC and Big Ten, kind of separating themselves and kind of demanding all this attention that also does challenge that. So again, that's what we are fighting in this dynasty. So we want to figure out what it would take for a small school to actually win a national championship. And with SSU, we're going to focus on the roster building aspect, recruiting, player development, strategy, and scheme. And then culture, you kind of get to simulate. This is something else I meant to mention. I'm going to try to do a better job of slowing down and explaining things in a way that makes sense to people who don't have a great knowledge of college football, but also keep it interesting to people who do have a decent level of knowledge of college football. Trying to appease not everyone, but at least give the nuggets where anyone could be interested. So, back to my point. Culture. It's not something you can really simulate in a video game, right? Because that's your day in, day out operation around people, right? That's a big part of it. So if you're a video game guy and know of NFL Head Coach 09, that's definitely a little more of the type of dynasty I am trying to do. However, I do still like playing the games and using certain players because I feel like that, to a degree, helps you simulate the culture aspect. And then another degree of that, I would say, is by incorporating you guys in the audience. I want your feedback, right? I want your help. Let me know. What do we want to see? What do we want to do? Right? So that's another way we're going to simulate culture, and I hope that makes it fun for you guys as the audience, because you guys can feel involved, and I want you guys involved, because, again, if you're running a team, as much as, yes, it's important to let players know you're the coach, you have final say, but that their opinion is valued, and what they think is valued, and that matters. So moving on, starting with recruiting. I put a recruiting restriction on myself. You can't really do it in the game, but we're going to take a max of 2 5-stars per class, a max of 4 4-stars, or a max of 6 total. So it's essentially which of those 2 out of the 3 do we hit first. So we couldn't get 6 5-stars and say, oh, well, we didn't take any 4-stars, right? And we can't take 4 stars to cover up for not getting 5 stars. If we want to get the 6 total top caliber players, we got to get the mix. And to clarify, for people who aren't familiar with college football recruiting, 5 stars are the top 32 players in the senior high school class. They're considered the guys who would be first-round NFL draft picks. 4 stars are guys who are projected 2nd to 7th round draft picks, so it's a wider range of guys. And then there's 3 stars, 2 stars, and 1 stars, and I don't know the exact definition for all of them, but essentially 3 stars and below aren't projected to be professional football players. Now, obviously, those aren't always consistent and accurate, so that's why with that bottom note, I say we want to get high ceiling 2 and 3-star guys that may be getting overlooked. That's a big thing for smaller programs, right? I would say scouting and being thorough with your scouting is super important for smaller programs. Having 4 and 5-star guys correlates with winning championships. So in the dynamic that we have, the Super 2 programs are the ones that kind of have the most natural draw to these 4 and 5-star guys, where it should be more of a challenge to us. And the reason I put in the restriction, I want to emphasize, recruiting is super, super important. It's just meant to create a simulation closer to reality. In the video game that we're using, College Football 25, if you play, you know this, it's not overly challenging to recruit well, and it's not to, right, so it, whoa, a lot coming out. So if you watch the series, last season, we finished 75th nationally in recruiting. Record-wise nationally, we probably finished lower than 75th. So we recruited above where we were, and I wouldn't call myself any sort of recruiting guru because I literally only play this dynasty and nothing else on this game. So I don't know all the little ins and outs that are there to kind of boost yourself, but it's definitely a little easier to work your way up to being able to have draw of those 4 and 5-star guys as it would be in real life. And the example I'm using is Boise State from 2006 to 2015. They were very good. You see the records on the screen there in that time frame. They finished in the top 10 4 times in that span, 7 times ranked, 3 Fiesta Bowl wins, the Stars with a season next to them, they won the Fiesta Bowl. Then on the far right there, that's their recruiting rank. And so obviously it does take a bit of a jump after that 2009, 2010 season. Part of that can be due to just better overall rankings, right? Better process by the people making the rankings, doing a better and more thorough job of scouting guys. Around that time, too, they moved from the Western Athletic Conference, the WAC, to the Mountain West. So part of that could be it, too. But you never see some big jump where all of a sudden they're recruiting, top 10 guys. And if you want to make the argument that their coaching staff just wasn't good at recruiting, fine. Maybe that's part of it. I'm not saying they couldn't have recruited better than this. But what I'm saying is this idea that, like, being a small program and just kind of jumping up to being like a top 10-ish ranked team doesn't all of a sudden give you this draw to these 4 and 5 star recruits where you're hauling in a top 10 class. That's a very college football 25 created dynamic. And I'm not trying to knock that in any way, right? I get that for pretty much everyone else playing this game, it's, not this serious. So I want to emphasize, I feel like the game actually does a good job of creating that balance of like, hey, it's a video game. This is roughly what it's like, but, we want to make it fun where, I'm making it not fun to a degree, man. We're really trying to grind it out here. But I did want to prove that point, and I also wanted to reference 2023 Michigan because there is a stat called composite roster strength, I guess. Composite roster ranking, actually. And what it is it takes all the recruiting classes currently on your roster and averages them out, and strictly based on recruiting rankings, it's how talented your roster is. And Michigan has the lowest ranking to ever win the national championship. They were 14th when they won it in 2023. I believe 2016 Clemson was the second lowest, and they were 9th. So I used the Boise State and Michigan comparison. We're trying to get somewhere in between there. So I guess we're trying to say that with the 12-team playoff, there's a little bigger of a window to get in and still win a national championship. So, moving on to player development, we are going to prioritize quarterback and offensive line first. And if you play the game, this emulates my coaching tree. And if you don't play the game, the coaching tree is essentially the power-ups and like how good your coach is supposed to be, you would say. So we're going to prioritize quarterback and offensive line, and then we're going to go defense. And I feel traditionally defensive line is viewed as the most important, and understandably so, right? If you can dominate the line of scrimmage, which, is just, the line of scrimmage is important on almost every play. It's really hard to consistently, or at least throughout an entire game, limit the impact of being disadvantaged at the line of scrimmage. However, because of what we're doing defensively, and I'll get more into this in that section of this series, I think linebacker is going to be most important, and then we're going to do defensive backs, and we're going to do D-line third, because I really want to prioritize depth on the D-line, where I really want high-end guys that can stay on the field more consistently at linebacker and defensive back. And then weapons are going to be last. So wide receiver and tight end in the game are grouped together. I would do tight end first, and then wide receiver and running back. But that's how it is. And again, this isn't me saying weapons aren't important. It's just in terms of what you need to do to build a program up to compete at the highest level from where we are. We need to first consistently compete in our conference. And again, we want to be equal at the line of scrimmage to be able to do that consistently. That's going to be super important. And then QB play is always important. But then weapons are certainly important. When we talk about being able to go up against, the Alabamas, the Georgias, Ohio States, yeah, we need some dudes on the outside. We need some dudes we can get the ball in the hands of. And you don't want to say bail you out, but that's kind of what it feels like, right? And I feel like if you are more familiar with football, you know what I mean. Like someone where when not everything else goes right, it's like, well, shoot, sometimes he's just better, right? He can go catch the ball over two dudes. He can just outrun a double team, right? Those things are huge. They're important. We're going to need playmakers when we go for championships. Don't get me wrong, but we need to be disciplined. We need to be smart. That starts at quarterback. And we need to be freaking physical, man. We need to blow some dudes off the freaking line of scrimmage and freaking take over some games. Let's go. Gameplay settings. I'm playing on varsity. I want to emphasize, I kind of talked about this. I don't play this game outside of this dynasty. I do no play now. Because of the time I've taken to put all this together, I've literally played 2 games of college football 25 in 2 months. So, I'm not on this, enough to really say I know the ins and outs. I will say with the sliders I have up here, it probably plays closer to All-American difficulty. The reason I put the settings and sliders where they are is I feel like, again, balanced with my own skill set, this emulates really what kind of schemes would work within games, right? So if you have a good understanding, or at least a decent understanding of schematics and how to attack coverage, where weaknesses are on a team, this plays out really, really well, especially if you're using a lower rated team. Because I will say, I think this is something that will have to get scaled. So as our team gets better, maybe we'll move it up to All-American, or maybe we'll just retweak the sliders. I don't think it'll be stagnant on this the whole time, but I think if you're trying to use, as low rated of a team as possible, and feel like, there's things you can still do that are realistic and could potentially work in that situation, but not to a degree where, it feels like you can kind of just walk all over any team you want. This is a good balance. So if you try them out, let me know. As you can see from the numbers, I'm pretty OCD with it. So, anyway, this is where we are. I'm by no means, the point of this dynasty is not for me to show off how good I am at this game. I'm very well aware of my skill level. The point of this is to emulate what it would be like to run a college football program as much as we possibly can through this game. So I just wanted to make that point real quickly. But in the next episode, we're going to get into our offensive and defensive schemes, what we're doing on the field, how do we want to match up when we're on a level playing field, and how do we want to go at the big dogs when we're at a disadvantage? How are we going to match up? How are we going to overcome being at a talent disadvantage? Find out in parts 3 and 4. Thanks for listening, everyone.